and charm, kindness. Each time you try to leave, their words, "You're just like everyone else, abandoning me," ring like a curse, pulling you back. In psychology, this is emotional manipulation, turning your empathy into an obligation. You think you're helping them heal, but in reality, they aren't seeking recovery. Because when pain is their only source of attention, healing means losing that power. It's like someone standing in a desert, refusing to drink water because they fear that once their thirst is gone, no one will care. You may have met someone like this, a colleague who constantly complains about being oppressed by their boss, despite switching jobs 3 times. A friend who is always the victim in every relationship. A family member whose every conversation revolves around how poorly they've been treated. When you suggest solutions, learn new skills, set boundaries, leave a toxic environment, they dismiss them instantly. No, you don't understand. Everyone out there is cruel. And so the story loops back to the beginning, only with a new villain. At its core, the eternal victim identity often stems from childhood, when a child learns that the only way to receive love is to appear weak. In a family where suffering was rewarded with attention, the unconscious internalizes a belief. To be loved, I must show pain. As adults, they don't realize they're reenacting this script in every relationship. Jung called this a complex old memories, emotions, and beliefs that steer us from the shadows. The deeper tragedy isn't just exhaustion, it's unconscious assimilation. You slip from empathy to merging, and yourself is pulled into the orbit of a story that isn't yours. In Jung's terms, a complex in them, I am the victim, is activated, and through emotional resonance, it triggers a corresponding complex in you. I'm only lovable when I save someone. These 2 complexes interlock like gears, spinning and wearing both of you down. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, in all your relationships, how many are true partnerships and how many are you simply playing the savior? Why do you feel guilty when you're happy Because those internalized scripts, the old voices of the adults who raised you, whisper, "Don't be too happy, lest someone else feels sad." Guilt isn't a moral truth. It's the residue of old teachings etched into your nerves. When you suppress your joy, you unknowingly renew an old contract. I'll shrink myself as long as you feel okay. That's how your self retreats, making way for the persona of the good, caring person, while your shadow bears the cost of depletion. The problem is, we often mistake empathy for love. Jung warned that blind empathy can become a gateway to being swallowed by someone else's shadow. It's like standing near a whirlpool. The more you try to pull them out, the stronger the pull, until you both sink. And what you don't realize is that they aren't swimming upward. They just want you down there with them. From Jung's perspective, the savior role you take on is also an inflated ego. The feeling that I can heal them gives you a gentle power, the power of being needed. The shadow of the savior is the need to control. Unconsciously, you believe that if you help enough, you'll steer their life in a new direction. But the more you help, the more you enable their complex. You hold the crutch so they never have to learn to walk. The signs of this type are clear if you pay attention. They always have a new villain in their story. They find reasons to reject every solution. They make you feel guilty for not helping more. They only come to you when they have a problem and vanish when things are calm. Jung didn't advise becoming cold or callous. He urged you to see reality clearly. You cannot heal someone from the outside. Carrying their burden only delays their confrontation with their own shadow. You can stand beside them, but you must not become their endless, emotional trash bin. And most importantly, don't let guilt become your chains. The eternal victim isn't always aware they're being manipulated. They've lived in their story so long, they've forgotten they could write a different one. But when you recognize them, you stop being swept into their cycle. When you set boundaries, you give both of you a chance to break free, whether they choose to or not. Remember, you're not selfish for refusing to be used. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is not let someone use their pain as a key to unlock your heart. By holding that door firm, you not only protect yourself, but you also give them a chance to face their darkness instead of making others carry it. Number 2, the beguiling mirror. Some people enter your life as if they've known you forever. They laugh at the right moments, nod at every story, and even finish your half-spoken sentences with the exact words you meant to say. You feel a rare connection, as if you've met a soulmate sent by the universe. But in truth, you haven't met them. You've met yourself, reflected through them. They're like a funhouse mirror, not reflecting reality, but shaping your image into something you love to see. You share a daring dream, they applaud it. You confess a fear, they empathize deeply. You voice a controversial opinion, they agree, or at least seem to. but over time, you notice a void. When you try to know who they are without you, there's no clear answer. Jung warned that those who live by mirroring you are loyal not to you, but to the acceptance you offer them. The bond isn't emotional, it's a tacit contract. I make you feel understood. You give me a place in your life. When this contract breaks, when you stop applauding or agreeing, they disappear, or worse, turn against you, because you're no longer the source of social energy they need. Another dangerous trait is their adaptability to any environment. They quickly learn the rules of the game in a group, mimicking speech patterns, opinions, and attitudes to always be the most likable. In a workplace, they're loved for always fitting in, never causing trouble. But that's exactly why you never know what they truly think. When their interests conflict with yours, they can change masks overnight. At a deeper level, this type often forms from childhood experiences where acceptance depended on pleasing others. A child learns to scan their parents' eyes, tone, and reactions to adjust their behavior for safety. As adults, this becomes a survival instinct, but at the cost of losing their true identity. In Jung's analysis, they've let their persona swallow their self, and their shadow is the fear of rejection so intense that they dare not show their true selves. You'll recognize this type if you observe. They rarely express strong opinions. Their responses revolve around supporting you. You feel admired but vague when you think about them. And if you challenge them one day, the atmosphere shifts startlingly fast. To protect yourself, Jung would advise staying grounded in reality, not the reflection. Don't just watch how they treat you. Watch how they treat those who offer them no benefit. Ask open-ended questions that can't be answered with mere agreement. Listen for whether they have their own stories, their values, or if they're just borrowing your language. The key is to remember that perfect harmony from the start isn't always a sign of destiny. Sometimes it's a signal you're looking into a finely tuned mirror. True relationships need both alignment and difference. If someone is always on your wavelength, never creating even a hint of friction, they may not truly be there, just your image standing across from you. And when the mirror fades, you'll see what Jung wanted you to understand. Not everyone who smiles at you is showing their true nature. Some are only reflecting you long enough to earn your trust, and when they need to change images, they'll do so without warning. You can't avoid every mirror, but you can learn to see through the glass, to discern what's a reflection and what's a real person. Number 3. The covert saboteur. If the beguiling mirror captivates you with your reflection, the next type keeps you close with a more cunning strategy. They offer you warm words of support, laced with subtle drops of doubt, just enough to weaken your wings before they can take flight. They don't stop you with a wall, they stop you with fog. The covert saboteur often enters your life as the caring one. They listen to your plans, cheer you on in front of others, and frequently say things that sound like praise. You're so brave to try that. I'm not sure I'd have the courage. But if you listen closely, their words carry a hidden layer. You're taking a risk. You might fail, and I'll be here to watch it happen. Their support is like a glass of cool water, but laced with a slow dissolving stone that chills your confidence. Jung described the shadow of the savior archetype when someone wears the guise of helping, but deep down fears losing control. If you succeed brilliantly, you won't need them anymore. If you become confident and independent, they're no longer your foundation. So, instead of blocking you outright, which would shatter their image, they sow seeds of doubt. Like weeds, these seeds don't sprout immediately, but wait for the rains and winds of life to take root, entangling your will. For example, you're excited about starting your project. They smile, say you have potential, but then add, "Running a business is exhausting." Or you want to enroll in a new course, and they nod but remark, "That tuition is steep. What if you can't apply it?" These comments aren't blatant enough to provoke a strong reaction. On the surface, they sound like reasonable concern. But that very reasonableness is the disguise that slips past your defenses and lingers in your mind. I recall a conversation with an old friend who dreamed of opening a small coffee shop. She shared, "I was so excited. I'd found a location and planned the menu. I told my closest colleague. She smiled brightly, said, 'Wow, you're amazing. If I had the money, I'd do it too.' But then she added, 'I'm just worried you'll be stressed because running a business is tough. Plus, there are so many great coffee shops now, so much competition. If you invest and it fails, it'll be rough.' I smiled, nodded. But that evening, her words, 'so many great coffee shops, so much competition,' kept echoing. Suddenly my idea felt smaller, vague, and exhausting. When the lease deadline came, I hesitated and gave up. What's striking is that my friend never thought her colleague was malicious. She cared about me, she said. But that really cared is what makes it dangerous. When sabotage is cloaked in care, you don't guard against it. You don't notice your confidence eroding bit by bit until it's too weak to carry you to your goal. Perhaps you've met someone like this, or maybe you've unknowingly been the one sowing those seeds of doubt. If you've experienced this, try sharing your story, because sometimes a single real-life account can help someone else see where they stand in their relationships. In psychology, this is indirect manipulation, undermining, where sabotage is wrapped in the guise of support. Jung saw this as a manifestation of an unintegrated shadow, fear of being left behind, a need for control, and feelings of inferiority, all suppressed in the unconscious but leaking out through behavior. The covert saboteur doesn't admit it. Sometimes they genuinely believe they're protecting you, but their true motive is to keep you just low enough so they still feel significant. In close relationships, exposure to this type is that you begin to internalize their limits. You hear their voice in your head every time you want to break through. "What if I fail?" And you believe it's your voice. Jung warned that when you can't distinguish your true instincts from the echoes of others, you're living in someone else's shadow, mistaking it for your light. You can recognize this type through certain signs. They rarely express full confidence in your plans. They often praise you first, then add a warning. Their advice leans toward safety and stability rather than exploration and expansion. And they emphasize risks over possibilities. They don't openly belittle you, They just lower your ceiling. To protect yourself, Jung would advise you to tune into your emotions after each conversation. If you start excited about a plan but feel deflated by the end, ask, did you just receive support, or did someone siphon your fuel? One effective approach is to share your ideas with different groups and observe the differences in their responses. When a reaction consistently makes you feel smaller, that's a sign you can't ignore. The key is to recognize that not every cautious word is sabotage. But when caution becomes a repetitive pattern, always tilting toward keeping you in your comfort zone, it's no longer protection. It's confinement. And confinement disguised as love is one of the most sophisticated forms of bondage. The covert saboteur often believes they're doing good. They don't see themselves as controlling, they see themselves as keeping you safe. But in Jung's philosophy, true love accepts the risk of losing each other because only in freedom are you truly present. Genuine help means giving tools and trusting you to use them, not holding the key in their hands. Number 4. The hidden competitor. When someone holds you back with strings of care, you might notice you're being restrained. But there's another type, more subtle, who doesn't pull you back. They run alongside you, smiling, and subtly step ahead. They don't drag you down or push you aside. They just ensure you know you're never truly in the lead. The hidden competitor is a master of silent rivalry. Whenever you share a success, they respond with a similar story, just slightly better. You mention being invited to speak at an event, and they note they were invited too, but to a bigger conference. You're thrilled about hitting a sales record. They recall hitting that number in half the time. Jung explained that this type is often driven by an unconscious inferiority complex. They don't necessarily hate you. They hate the feeling that you reflect their shortcomings. Instead of facing and growing from that feeling, they level the playing field by reclaiming a higher position, even if only on an imaginary scoreboard in their mind. I experienced this in a decade-long friendship. Every time I achieved something, she was the first I told. She'd smile, congratulate me, but within minutes, she'd share how she'd done something similar or was about to do something bigger. At first, I didn't feel upset, just a strange tightness in my chest. Over time, I realized she never truly let me be the one celebrated. She seemed to listen, but was waiting to counter with her own success story. When I failed, she comforted me, but her eyes held a faint relief, as if I'd returned to a safe position for her. Picture this type as a shadow running parallel to you. You glance over, see them beside you, and think you have a companion. But when you speed up, the shadow speeds up too, and when you slow down from exhaustion, it steps ahead, just enough for you to see the gap. This isn't healthy competition, which inspires mutual growth. This is a competition that uses your success as a measure of their self-worth. In a workplace, the hidden competitor often poses as a friendly colleague. They share information, give feedback on projects, but subtly claim your efforts as partly theirs. If you're praised, they chime in. Actually, we discussed that idea together. If you propose an initiative, they might restate it in another meeting as if it were their own. Their goal isn't collaboration. It's ensuring the spotlight never shines solely on you. This is a moment to pause and look around. Among those who smile and call you a friend, how many eyes are truly watching with joy, and how many are waiting to step level when you falter? Jung saw this as a result of projecting unaccepted parts of oneself onto others. The hidden competitor sees in you what they want but haven't achieved, and instead of learning or admitting it, they diminish your value to ease their inner pressure. This makes them need to stay close to monitor you, yet keep you near enough not to feel inferior. Spotting this type requires subtlety. Notice how they react when you share good news. Do they let you take center stage or quickly redirect the story to themselves? When you fail, how do they comfort you? Is it empathy or a trace of relief? Where your victories are always turned into a measure of someone else's insecurity. Number 5. The falsely enlightened. The hidden competitor leaves a lingering bitterness, like the smell of smoke after a fire you never saw burning. You think you've seen all the faces of rivalry, but then the path takes another turn. There, no footsteps race, no eyes measure you, only stillness, the scent of sandalwood, and a hand extended, inviting you into the light. You think you've found a haven, but this is what Jung called the temple of the ego cloaked in sanctity. The falsely enlightened carry an aura of tranquility. They speak of meditation, mindfulness, energy, and self-understanding as if they've traversed all pain and found truth. But for Jung, what they've attained isn't liberation from the ego. It's a new persona they've donned to mask a shadow brimming with pride and a need for control. They haven't slain their ego. They've merely draped it in a white robe and adorned it with crystals to make it appear pure. In reality, this type manipulates not with commands, but with the language of spirituality and maturity. If you show frustration, they smile. I sense you're reacting from an unhealed wound. If you disagree, they say gently, perhaps you're not ready to receive the truth. On the surface, their words seem reasonable, but their effect is to make you doubt your emotions, thoughts, and even your ability to judge for yourself. You're drawn into a psychological chess game where every move of resistance is turned into proof that you're not yet enlightened. And if one day you look into the mirror they hold up and realize it reflects only the version of you they want you to be, will you still recognize who you are? Jung warned that when someone overly identifies with the image of the enlightened one, they view anyone who disagrees as not yet there. This is a subtle power dynamic. They're always the teacher, you the student. And those roles never swap. Like a blinding lamp in a dark room, their light doesn't empower you. It dazzles you until you forget you can shine on your own. In psychology, this is a form of spiritual bypassing, using spiritual language to avoid facing their own shadow. They may preach unconditional love, but grow cold toward anyone who doesn't follow their lead. They may lecture on humility, but need others to see them as the ultimate source of light. Their enlightenment is a stage, and you're the chosen audience to sustain their performance. To recognize this type, notice how you feel after interacting with them. Do you feel empowered or diminished, inadequate, unworthy? Do you feel like you're learning or striving to become a version of yourself they approve of? If every time you express your views, the response is, "You don't understand yet," you may not be on a path to enlightenment. You're being led into a cycle of dependency. Jung would say the difference between a true teacher and a falsely enlightened one is this: a teacher guides you back to your essence. The pretender guides you to them. A teacher rejoices when you surpass them. The pretender fears the day you no longer need them. One helps you see your darkness and light. The other convinces you that only they hold the lamp to guide you. To break free from their influence, you must distinguish guidance from shaping. Guidance is giving you a map to navigate. Shaping is molding you to fit their frame. Jung emphasized that individuation is never about copying another's path. It's finding the road only you can walk. The falsely enlightened aren't necessarily malicious. They may believe they're doing right. But if you feel smaller, quieter, more dependent after being with them, that's not enlightenment. It's control dressed in spiritual garb. And any form of control, no matter its disguise, robs you of your inner freedom. Number 6. The sensitive controller. Those cloaked in enlightenment hold you with the light you think you need. But step through another door, and you'll encounter a subtler form of power, not from knowledge or superiority, but from tears and the slight tremble of fingertips. Here, power doesn't wear a white robe. It's wrapped in a delicate veil called sensitivity. The sensitive controller makes you believe you're beside a fragile, delicate soul that needs protection. They claim to feel everything more deeply than others. The energy in a room, subtle shifts in your tone, even emotions you haven't named. At first, this awes and even impresses you. Who wouldn't want to be seen and understood so completely? But soon, you notice yourself changing, speaking softer, stifling frustrations, even hiding joy for fear it might make them feel left out. You no longer live as you did. You live in an atmosphere adjusted to your tolerance. I once heard a story from a designer, a follower of our channel, who loved a man her friends described as deeply sensitive. He could read my mood from a text, she said. If I was upset, he knew instantly. But over time, I had to weigh every word. Once, when I spoke a bit rushed, he said I was emitting negative energy. When I disagreed with him, he went silent for a week because he was hurt. I started apologizing even when I wasn't wrong, just to avoid those long silences. She didn't realize it, but she'd surrendered her natural expression to keep his crystal vase from shattering. Picture this type as a room filled with fragile glass vases. You enter, afraid to bump anything, holding your breath, lest they fall. Over time, you grow used to stepping lightly, speaking softly, until you forget you once knew how to dance, sing, or laugh loudly. And that's when the sensitive controller gets what they want, you living in orbit around them. In a workplace, they might be the colleague who feels drained when you challenge their ideas, creating an atmosphere where everyone agrees to keep the peace. Anyone who speaks directly is labeled harsh or insensitive. In a family, they could be the relative who makes you feel guilty for not spending enough time with them or for making choices they don't approve of. From Jung's perspective, this is a form of emotional dependency built on feelings. Their shadow is filled with insecurity and fear of abandonment, and instead of healing it, they turn it into a 24/7 alarm system, forcing you to constantly monitor their emotions. The issue isn't their sensitivity, it's how it's used as a lever of power. You can spot this type when you notice yourself frequently censoring your emotions before speaking, feeling guilty for prioritizing yourself, or sighing with relief when they're stable, as if your job is to keep them emotionally safe. A healthy relationship doesn't require you to be the gatekeeper of someone else's mood. Jung would advise that to escape this control, you must return their shadow to its rightful owner. You don't break the glass vases, you simply refuse to live your life in a room where touching anything is forbidden. This starts by giving them back responsibility for their emotions while reclaiming your right to express and exist freely in your own space. The key is understanding that true sensitivity comes with the ability to self-regulate emotions. Sensitivity used to control others is just manipulation wrapped in the thin veil of feeling. You can empathize, but you cannot sacrifice your entire self to keep the peace for someone unwilling to stand on their own. The sensitive controller rarely says, "I want to control you." They say, "I feel so much." But if you let them steer the relationship, you'll slowly shrink, live smaller, speak less, until your presence exists only to maintain their fragile balance. And by then, the power is no longer yours. It's in the hands of the one you thought was weak. At the end of this journey through 6 hidden faces, we realize that the most frightening thing isn't blatant cruelty, but the disguise is so clever that even their wearers sometimes don't realize they're masked. Jung once said that the shadow doesn't vanish when we turn away. It waits for a chance to emerge from corners we least expect. And often, those corners aren't far off. They're at the family dinner table, in the meeting room, or in the comforting words of a text message. But if we stop at merely identifying others, we miss a crucial truth. Each of these types doesn't just exist out there. They lurk somewhere within you. In moments of weakness, you may have unknowingly played the eternal victim to gain attention. While trying to protect someone, you may have sown a seed of doubt as the covert saboteur. And in your longing to be loved, you may have mirrored someone else just to see them smile. Let these 6 faces become 6 mirrors, not to make you live in suspicion, but to help you choose who walks with you on the path of individuation, the path where, as Jung believed, only by embracing both your light and shadow can you truly be free. There is a kind of silence in this world that brings stillness draws the notice of those who are perceptive. This isn't the silence of calm. It is a silence with weight, with history. The silence of someone who once opened their heart too wide and was betrayed, who once loved fully, trusted completely, and then had to pick up the shattered pieces of their soul in solitude. From that, they learned one thing. Silence is the only way to survive. Their gaze isn't sharp, but watchful. Their voice isn't shaky, but controlled. Every response seems soft, yet calibrated like a finely tuned alarm system. Because pain made them this way. Carl Jung once wrote, "What you resist persists." Suppressed emotions, unnamed wounds, they don't disappear. They go underground, and from there they shape how we see the world. For those who have been wounded too deeply, the unconscious becomes the driver. They no longer approach people with their hearts, but with radar. They scan every facial expression, every slight change in tone, every delay in a reply, like living in an invisible war zone. And they don't do this to control. They do it out of fear. Not fear of losing someone else, but fear of losing themselves again in pain. This kind of defensive behavior is often misunderstood as cold, distant, or worse, incapable of love. But in truth, it's a new form of damaged love. A person who once loved too deeply and was drained by betrayal cannot love the same way again. They need time. They need patience. And above all, they need to be seen as they truly are, not told to be more cheerful, open up, or simplify their feelings. Because it's their depth that is the result of what they've survived. Picture a child once left alone in the dark. Over the years, they may have learned to smile, to interact. But the moment the lights go out again, they recoil. Not out of weakness, but because their body still remembers. Jung called these memories complexes, emotional knots formed when an experience is too overwhelming to process and gets pushed into the unconscious, only to resurface in patterns of behavior. So when you see someone keeping their distance, don't assume they don't care. Maybe they care so much that they have to keep their distance in order not to be swept away. Maybe they have love and lost so much that now, caution is the safest way they know to express affection. And the kindest thing you can do is not to push them to open up, but to give them a reason to feel safe enough to do so. 2. Wearing the social mask, persona. And when silence is no longer enough to shield them, they learn to wear a mask. Not to deceive others, but to protect themselves from the gaze of the world. That's when the persona, a concept Carl Jung introduced, begins to form, a shield both intricate and heavy. According to Jung, the persona is the social mask, the version of ourselves we present to the world in to be accepted, to avoid further pain. For those who have suffered too much, the persona isn't just a role, it's armor. They put on the image of someone strong, kind, composed, sometimes to the point of perfection. They become the ones who always know how to comfort others, always appear calm in conflict, always seem fine, even when their mind is falling apart. But beneath that shell is a storm of emotion, unnamed and untouched. They laugh when they're supposed to, say the right things, stay just close enough to avoid abandonment, yet far enough not to be hurt. What others see is someone resilient, but in truth, it's someone in survival mode. Every time they shrug and say, "It's nothing," it might be because they just held back tears. Every time they help someone else, It might be a way to forget that no one was there for them. Jung once wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself, as well as others, think one is." Those who wear the persona too long start to forget who they truly are. And the danger is, the world will praise them for that mask. You're so strong. You're always calm. You're the rock for others. Words meant to encourage, but which only deepen their feeling that they must never fall apart, must never show weakness, must never be their true self. But eventually, the mask begins to crack, maybe in a sleepless night, when there's no one around to maintain the image. Maybe in a moment of solitude, when the pain rushes in and no role is strong enough to hold it back. That is when the soul begins to cry out, to be acknowledged, to be loved not for the persona, but for the self beneath it. And if they're lucky, they'll meet someone unafraid of the storm, someone sensitive enough to see through the mask, patient enough to stay when the real self is revealed. Because in the end, as Jung taught, the path to wholeness doesn't lie in perfecting the persona, it lies in removing it, in descending into the candlelight. And if you are someone who carries such a world within, I want to ask you, do you feel safe in that universe of yours? Are you hiding from something? If so, tell me what made you build that shelter. Don't be afraid. Writing it down might be the first step back. I'm here, reading and listening. Number 2. Common psychological responses of those who have been hurt. 1. Heightened defensive psychology. Some people enter a room and instantly scan every face, every glance, every gesture, not to seek attention, but to detect threats. They read the atmosphere like an animal that has once been hunted. They pick up the slightest shifts in tone, the odd pauses in a sentence, the way someone blinks when answering. It's not paranoia. It's the nervous system of someone deeply wounded, doing exactly what it was designed to do: survive. When you've been betrayed by someone you trusted, your mind never works the same again. Jung understood this. He wrote, "The healthy man does not torture others. Generally, it is the tortured who turn into torturers." And perhaps more hauntingly, the wounded often don't hurt others. They torture themselves through doubt, control, and the fear of reliving the past. These individuals are often labeled as too sensitive, suspicious, or difficult. But if you're observant enough, you'll see them functioning as a hyper-defensive system, where every signal is analyzed, and every silence carries meaning. It's a natural response from someone who was hurt at their most open moments. If you've ever loved someone like this, let me ask you, did you ever feel like you were talking to both them and an invisible gatekeeper within them? One part listening, another part guarding. If so, you're not alone, and neither are they. 2. Responding to old wounds through new people. Next, let's talk about one of the most common, yet most misunderstood phenomena, when the past suddenly crashes into the present through seemingly trivial details. They're not reacting to you, they're reacting to the shadow of someone else, an old wound, a memory deeply etched into their psyche. For instance, you might say something casually like, "I'm busy today, let's talk tomorrow." Suddenly, the energy shifts. They go cold, distant, maybe even angry, and you don't know why. But in their mind, that sentence mirrors the last words of someone who once abandoned them, a parent,